Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Scott Killaby and Mihai Algiu, and we are talking as usual about the need of having a versatile, thorough type of spiritual practice, which includes both presence, witnessing, awareness, non-duality, but includes as well processing our pain body, limiting beliefs, addictions, compulsions, repression, all the personal. So the personal and the impersonal put in on a blender, and for the purposes of inner freedom. That's what KI is. And I didn't check with Scott about this definition.
Good enough for,
sorry?
good enough for me. Works for me.
So let's get straight into it. And the context is that, so this is episode number 26. We have 26th episode talking about these topics in depth. So they are here in the body of the video. However, number 24 and number 25, and this is number 26. So the last three, we focused on the map of 3 dimensions of practice, which is a development. I mean, it's not a development, it's more like after having developed the work and working with thousands and thousands of people, then it became more clear for Scott. Oh, I see, that's what's happening. We are starting here and we are going there in order to come out of this labyrinth of suffering. So it came more of a clear map. So the last 2 meetings, episode 24 was part 1. We focused on the first dimension of practice, and in the last episode, I think now in the first episode we focused on the first and second dimension of practice. In the last episode, number 25, we focused on the third dimension of practice, which is the repression and trauma, where we have our most unpleasant and painful pain body, and out of which all our problems arise, since our psychological, emotional, somatic problems arise. So last time we dealt with the third dimension more in a theoretical, philosophical, giving the context, how it relates to other practices. And we promised, and our aim is to go into the third dimension today, more like, okay, how to enter this, where to enter this third dimension. And it's almost like it's a map to the third dimension map. And this is for people, we are aware that it won't make much sense. It's just random people see this, but it will make a lot of sense for people who are already engaging in somatic processing, especially via Killaby inquiries, and people who already been working with deficiency stories, with shadow work, with mining, with processing various types of pain body. And they are ready to now go deeper, to go to the core of it, to go to the roots of it, rather than dealing with the fruits, the apples of suffering, to go to the roots of the tree. And one last thing here, I think we touched in the last episode, why do this? Why go into the fires of hell and feel this again? And so, you want to say a few thoughts on this, Scott?
Yeah, I do. Because as soon as you said that, I was like, what do you mean feel it again? I never felt it in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. But with repression, like with the anger repression, like I don't remember ever feeling it. I was just sharing in a video yesterday that some people are looking back at their past and they're looking for those moments when they were angry or sad and they stuffed it down. But with repression, you wouldn't have any memory of it because it's just completely not allowed in awareness. So for that, why would I want to feel that? If there was a reason not to feel it before, I mean, the easiest answer is that unless you want to suffer. That's how Ken Wilber explains it. You don't have to do any of this work unless you want to suffer, because this is actually helping us not suffer, but not through bypassing it or avoiding it, but by going through it. But why would I go through it? Is because we educate ourselves and we understand that, you know, after a while, we understand that by not going into it, there's lots of effects. I had the chronic pain, spinal stenosis. So there's suffering again. So for me, it was like, I guess, is the fear of facing that anger outweighed by the suffering of the pain and the suicidal thoughts, you know, because it can get really bad. But for me, it was, why do it? I don't know. Intuitively, I understood that I was missing something. And I understood that what I missed was creating issues. So if there's an earnestness on the path, I think there is for a lot of people who come to KI, you're probably going to want to open to it for the same reason. Because as we do this interview, we'll show you, I think we're going to show you how, if you don't open to it early, how it can, as we said before, it bears all this fruit that we have to deal with, suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess why, you know, basically I went for the path 20 plus years ago, went for awakening and enlightenment. And they have this saying that when you go on the path and you're serious about it, it's almost like you are lining up in a huge queue and you don't know what they are selling because you are outside of the store. That was how it was in communist Romania. The queue was outside of the store. You didn't know what they have in the store, but you need to queue in. So I guess I was queuing in for some mystical specialness and these fairy tales of Buddha meditating or enlightenment or yogic powers or immortality or imperturbability or absolute peace, all of that. But looking back, I mean, we want to feel okay. We want to be at peace. We want to feel good in our body. And I mean, I think that's what most people want, no matter what they say. Actually, you want some inner happiness, inner harmony, inner freedom, while enjoying life fully. Yeah.
Yep.
So I found out that for me, the third dimension practice is a way to really go for that and to experience that. And you know, all the other awakening practices and awareness practices and ego deconstruction stuff, they were very, very helpful in a way that diminished a lot of patterns and diminished mind busyness and got clarity on being the awareness. But they were pernicious patterns. They created suffering lingering. In my case, it was connected to ongoing chronic relational unfulfillment and chronic like pattern after pattern, the same thing playing over and over in spite of awakening or not awakening of suffering in intimate relationships, and a bunch of patterns that I couldn't quite understand or get to it. I brought them to my teachers. They would just lightly help me about it, but yeah. So for me, it's I guess when I say in Romania, when the knife gets close to the bone, then you are really going to get motivated. So tired of suffering, tired of the same pattern. It creates suffering, repeating over and over. And anyway, I discovered that actually at the bottom of it, of relational patterns, consciously, you know, I can go to a couples therapist and we talk about this pattern and that pattern, and we are talking about this, but the relationship, but what's underneath is that lack of having processed some trauma when I was a baby, and trauma when I was 6-year-old, loss of caretaker, changing of caretaker. This is like classic, now we call the attachment wound, attachment disruption, which created all this avoidance, not going to, anyway, so it created a lot of patterns that I've been dealing with, incredible of suffering for me and the suffering for all the women that I engaged with. So yeah.
Can I say something about that just real quick before your next thought? Because when I look back at the anger repression, which was my primary, it was definitely the suffering that motivated me. The knife got too close to the bone. But I want to say to all those folks out there, there's a lot of reward in some of these repressions, social reward and safety. So in some ways, I was lucky because the anger repression turned into chronic pain and disease, like it does quietly for many people who don't realize that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is you could spend your whole life getting really rewarded from your repression. So for the years, I got a lot of reward. I mean, I'm a good listener. I'm a good person to hang out with. Somebody said you're like a walking Xanax, right? You know, you don't really bring conflict to situations. You don't impose your viewpoint. You don't gaslight, because that's what peacemakers do, you know? And so there's a lot of reward, and I was getting love, a lot of it that way. So for those of you who are not experiencing the suffering, like the physical stuff yet, you have to watch for the stealthiness of it, so that like you're just moving through life. And this aspect of suffering from anger repression, there'll be so many rewards that you might not even be tuned into how it's creating suffering. That's where I had to read the science. You might have to go outside of your reward system to see what might be happening under the surface, like how it was manifesting as a disease for me. I just want to say that because some people might say, I don't relate to what you're saying, guys, because it's pretty smooth riding as I'm peaceful with anger repression. That is, there's other repressions, but with that one is particularly like that.
Yeah, you know, actually now I was mentioning about this would be, let's say, the deepest layer of suffering. But as I was working with you, and I didn't have in mind, oh, I should do repression work. I didn't know what that means, but somehow we're doing that. And so I stumbled upon great benefits by chance, like, you know, somehow rescuing the ability to feel anger, rather than I had a little bit of this good boy, you know, peaceful guy too. And so rescuing that ability and the ability to express it appropriately, so that made me much more, you know, I can put boundaries, I can say no, I can be in touch with my yes and no and be okay with the no. This creates, this avoids so much torture and turmoil, you know. Also lingering addictions for me, although they were not big addictions, they were still daily addictions, like with like marijuana and tobacco and other stuff. So keep trying to work with them and have phases of not using and using again. So somehow it helped me, the repression and trauma work helped me to get to the bottom of it and to see that this unprocessed trauma and unprocessed, like my fear, having been shut down all my life, and sadness, avoiding sadness and loss and grief, that, and shame. I guess I still need to go a bit more deeper into shame. This next on the agenda. So that was creating, you know, tensions in my body, in my belly, some kind of, in the non-duality, they call it sense of lack, sense of something is not quite right, something is missing. And so I would alleviate those with urges and obviously seeking more non-duality or seeking relationship. So somehow I discovered Scott was right, that drivers, the drivers of suffering are those that fuel compulsion. The drivers being deficiency, core woundedness, shame, trauma, repression. So at some point I stopped focusing on, hey man, I should stop it, man. I should just stop this thing. And I was focusing on third dimension practices like inquire, process around feelings and repression, not resisting of feeling each time before using, and then really so I feel very happy at this moment with heavy diminishment of compulsion, to the point that a sense of freedom and being okay, sober, and I can meet my emotions. I can meet them now. And actually my system is like, I don't want to smoke now, man. I just want to be be with this thing. So all kind of benefits come to me now.
That's amazing. But that brought up a couple things. One thing, because we're not just talking about anger repression. I want to be that clear, because there's more than that. But I want to speak from my own experience, which is anger repression, or just repression. If we could show people the inner body, if the clearest teaching around this would be to show people the changes in the body, but we can't. Because that's what all of us who do third dimension KI work are actually trusting, I think, is our somatic experience, but we can't convey it to others. So others have to listen to us and kind of, like listen to us to explain what happens in the inner body, but they have to experience it themselves. Literally, if I could just open my body up and show you before the chronic pain and after, you would see the changes somehow. And you probably wouldn't even question it then. You'd be like, that's what happened from inquiry? And they'd be like, okay, yeah, I want to do that. But so we can't show people that. So so what we're learning now in KI is, though, if we can get to the unprocessed energy in the body. So what I've learned from, for example, you mentioned addiction, fake tobacco is one of the hangers on for me, going all the way back to when I was bullied for being gay, for showing feminine characteristics. So I learned, like I really learned it, like you learn how to write. I learned that you don't show that side of yourself. So I had no idea that for 40 something years, off and on, using tobacco and then fake tobacco, is that what I was trying to do was keep the feminine down. Because if you chew tobacco, you're a boy. So all the time that I was spending on anything other than that, to me, was not the point. If the tobacco was connected straight to trauma and repression, I needed to just go there. And I actually didn't. For many years, I didn't know how. Because we're just learning now in KI how to go directly to the unprocessed past with it. So for this particular addiction, I've only been able chance to work with it and skillfully in the last 3 or 4 months. And finally, I'm getting to the frozen fear, as you know, around it, and whatever other unprocessed emotions. But if I could show people, like for me to even explain this, I don't even like saying, oh, you should try this, because it's like, it's all body. You see what I mean? It's like even the mind trying to convince people, all that I'm trying to say is, if you trust your body, you would know. But I can't show that to you. So all we can do is talk about it, and we're talking around it. And hopefully some people will read the science and understand that, what we're talking about has a basis in fact, has a basis in research. We're not just coming up with some conjecture and seeing if it's true. We're actually tracking the science, and we're tracking our direct experience. And we're literally tracking that our cravings and our triggers and our shadows are directly connected to unprocessed emotions. Like we're tracking it, directly. And when that happens, there's a lot of confidence that comes with that. A lot of not confidence, but like the way that you're coming out now, Mihai, sharing it differently with this, like you're being able to share so directly about your experience and communicate that. The only way that you can do that is through direct experience, I think. So that's what I'm interested in, is people coming to do the work, not just listening to these videos, because once you start doing the work, then you're tracking the correct thing, the body. See, until then, everybody's just listening and they're tracking what we're saying with the mind, I think. And that's the disconnect. Part of it is like, this is a somatic approach. You really do have to do it to even understand really kind of what we're saying.
Yeah. If we could have this energetic MRI before and after. So I'm now reverse engineering the fruits of the work. I can see now, because I'm taking it for granted. I got used to it, but I was doing a lot of men's work, Mankind Project, and there they were recommending us to have all systems online and to have range and to drop into the lover, the magician, the warrior, the king, and like a full-on range of energies. And so I was doing this 12 years ago, and it was like, yeah, I want that. But so in order to be like real, to be, so to be real and authentic, by the way, there are studies, and Gabor Mate talks about it, that's a common factor for cancer, is that this kind of chronic inability to be authentic. And so thus compromising oneself and going against oneself. And it only makes sense that the cells start going against the body. So yeah, one benefit for me for doing this work more thoroughly with the KI was to I guess we are deconstructing the fake identity, and the protection and the strategies and the hiding and the trying to appear nice and to trying to be good, trying to please, trying to avoid conflict, trying to be liked, trying to get approval, trying to stay safe. So all of this is like all these constructs. So as they fall to the wayside, then there's more like me. What I mean by me, it's like not the self Atman, although that's that. So it's like the authentic me, the Mihai without too many conditions and apologies. And so, and that's, we can't really have really awakening or happiness without the authentic nature, right?
Yeah, I was also explaining it a different way yesterday, is what would be more freeing if you could just be yourself, completely show up as the individual expression, seeing that it's empty, but not trying to avoid it or deny it or dismiss it. Like you're awake through it. You know what I mean? You're not having to try to get away from it and its emotions or its thoughts. You're waking up and seeing all of its emotions and thoughts are empty. All the objects that the self sees are empty. Like the non-dual is like infused into everything, in the relative. Like we don't have to try to leave. So would you rather have that kind of freedom where you just show up as you are? It feels very free and very natural to be you. And you also know there's no separate self. And you're not really afraid of dying because you've seen through separation. But you're not afraid to live because you've seen through your fear of emotions. And so would you rather have that than some sort of avoidant type spirituality that tries to avoid that human experience? And I think as you hear it more and more, well, of course, I don't want the avoidant spirituality. I mean, if you really hear it, but I think people might think that it's not possible, that you could actually wake up and embody it, and actually stay in relationship or stay engaged somehow with the world. And I think what we're learning is that's really the only way to embody it in a way. Because if you keep pulling away from all your addictions and all your relationships, that just might be the way that you're avoiding the emotions, right? But as we bring inquiry into all the relationships, all the addictions, I think that's what people are going to start experiencing, what you're experiencing, which is like, I was running all my life away from the Mihai-ness. And then when I realized that the Mihai-ness is empty and all of its different, like I don't have to run away from it. And there's a settling into this in a way that doesn't feel avoidant anymore. Spirituality doesn't feel avoidant. I don't know if you feel that. It doesn't feel that way, but it did for a long time.
Yeah, actually I was a long time student of the Fourth Way, Gurdjieff, and the map there was that, hey, we start from being asleep and in a false identity. Our true essence, the authentic flower, is there in the corner suffering, oppressed by the false identity. And the map was like, get more conscious, get more aware, and dismantle the false thing. Dismantle it, the false thing, so that the authenticity is not oppressed in the corner. And then the authenticity starts to have more space, and it starts to now be the cockpit of the path. And then awakening, a real awakening, full awakening can only be from the authentic nature, cannot be from the false identity, So I can see that this parallels this what we're doing here in KI.
Yep.
And yeah.
Well, I just want to say one other thing, because I've been able to find words for it recently more, is so the femininity repression and the anger repression were parts of myself that were natural, but because I couldn't bring them forth, the false self had to come forth. So that's what I'm saying is the repression of the trauma is like directly connected to the identity, but it's hard to see. The easiest one for me to explain is if I have to hold back anger, I can't come out as a villain. I have to come out as a good boy, as a good person, in order to cover the anger up. So there's a direct connection right there. If you can't see that, come on, that's connected. Your false identity is there. You're having to bring forth what you can't. Excuse me. You're having to put forth for yourself and for others something that is false, because what is real for you can't be. So when what is real for you, so to speak, is brought into awareness, it collapses the falseness, because the falseness is there to hide the repression from yourself and from others. So for example, when people see me putting on makeup and YouTube, a couple of people have said, so now you're identified with the feminine. I said, no, because that I was identified with the opposite. I was identified with not showing up that way. That was my false identity. But just letting this come online, that collapses. What you're seeing is more of a natural expression. See, it's not but a hammer only sees nails. So if a hammer believes, if all you see is your false self and you don't see the repression, then when somebody else starts to express, the hammer is going to see nails. It's going to see you're doing what I would be doing. You're doing that because you're identifying with it, and maybe even getting approval or attention from it, not recognizing that we who repress spend our whole lives making sure we don't have attention on this. So this is the stuff we're scared of. So when we bring stuff we're scared of online, the falseness can go away at that point. But other people will be confused about that, potentially. Because again, if they haven't done that work, they're just watching you express. So that's why when people get angry, they might think, you're identified with it. It might not be that. It might be that anger has been brought online, and you're just seeing a natural expression of that. What was false was the person who couldn't do that. So we're getting confused sometimes when we see people start to express. We're thinking, just like when you did your sadness memoirs video, people said, oh, you're sad now. I'm so sorry. But can you want to explain what that was like actually from your side?
She's referring to I've been, let's say, teaching or putting videos, and I felt very comfortable doing that, but all of them, they had a certain flavor of I was teaching about concepts or teaching about processing, or I was doing guided meditations or guided processes or talking like this about this, and I felt comfortable doing that for a long time. But I wouldn't really go into sharing really vulnerably on YouTube about deep sadness and loss and fears and this young child kind of being needy and lost, and how the suffering that these patterns they created in my life for many women. So I don't know, at some point recently there was a current trigger on top, something happened on top of my life, and I made use of it to not resist it anymore, not to resist the loss, not to resist the sadness, not to resist the loneliness, and to use these third dimension tools that I knew to allow the feeling. And what happened is that the current stressor, the current thing that happened, like suffering, like life, end of relationship, it brought me like down the map into the third dimension, where was my deepest trauma. And somehow I would allow those feelings much more, instead of going towards the Rupert spiral guided meditation to soothe myself, or instead of going to weed or whatever, dating or other. People have different things, chocolate, porn, meth, whatever. So instead of doing that, I knew that, man, I have to do this. I have to face this, man. So I did it. It was hard, and it's still hard. But out of that came like, dude, I need to share this. So anyway, the point is that came another type of sharing, which initially I was a little bit afraid. I was like, man, I'm showing myself, I don't have it together, people will judge me, people will this or that, but it felt so good to share really from the heart and to share, not to hide. So anyway, it went a whole other level of realness and authenticity, which I think that people can sense that, and it helps. And also, I think many people have this sadness, loss, repression that creates a lot of problems. So that was helpful for people. Yeah.
But somebody thought that you were doubled over in the sadness. They said
Oh
something.
yeah. There are people, there were some of my clients who, they know the Mihai who has it together and is in control, and it's like, they were like, oh man, are you okay? Do you need help? I think you should go to a therapist, man. I think you need to do this, or like, oh man. So, they were lovingly, caringly, trying to help me out. But what they didn't know is that I'll wake up like feeling like shit with all these feelings that I haven't felt from all my life. And I would really face them and let them devour me using third dimension tools. And I will cry and I will moan and I will wail for like 17 minutes or 20 minutes. And then I'll be like, oh yeah, all right. So then I had a whole full day, great, happy flow. In the night, I will do it again. So a few days of that, and so people, and then I will share it after that or before that. So people didn't know that actually I'm not wallowing. That doesn't mean I'm wallowing in it all day and I'm suffering and I lost the path,
Yeah.
They took it as a great success. The fact that I can do that finally. I can grieve for a loss of a deep connection. It's like, dude, this is so normal. I mean, it's a great breakthrough, and it doesn't get stored anymore and avoided so that it comes up next time. You know what I mean?
Yes. Because here's the thing. The reason I brought it up is because I want to say something. I wanted you to talk about that because people did the same thing with me. They said, oh, you found all that anger. I'm so sorry that you have. No, you don't understand. I was angry my whole life.
Yeah.
My whole life, I was angry. So the fact that I discovered it was a celebration because it was already there creating all these. So that's not a bad thing. When people say, oh, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. If you're going to feel sorry for that person who couldn't open to that. Feel sorry for that, but you don't really need to even feel sorry for that. The point being, I think that in spirituality, if we have the perspective that somehow if an emotion is showing up, that's bad, we're all going to stay repressed. So like what I'm trying to do is change the paradigm around it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, good. You're feeling sadness. That's awesome, man. After so many years of that is fucking awesome. I'm so glad for you. That kind of paradigm.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Hey, so, okay, we are still staying a little contextual and philosophical, which is good. So this idea that, especially for deep seekers and the committed non-dualists, so there is the Vedantic. Yeah, I'm going to show you how repression fits into this. Yeah, there's the Vedantic, the Advaita Vedanta approach to awakening, which is geared a lot towards practices and teachings that the end result will be that I realize I am the witnessing presence and that I am not the content of the mind and the feeling. And, in Bhagavad Gita, Upanishad, all of these holy texts, they talk about not being the world and not being the thoughts. And Buddha, in teaching meditation, they're saying, hey, see that this thought is not me, it's not I, it comes and goes. This feeling is not me, not I, it comes and goes. So yeah, so a lot of the Vedantic, or at least as it survives to us now, it's geared to reach here. Hey, I am I am the witnessing presence, and the thing's an illusion, and it doesn't matter, and it's not me. And there's a tendency, because that is so cool if one experiences, and it gives some sense of stability and safety, that one will stop there. Yeah. But now they say, even in non-duality, that, hey, this is about 30% of the journey. And this neti position, this is just a pedagogical tool for you to no longer be sucked into the washing machine. But now that you see that you are not that, and the presence is not affected by anything, then don't just stay there and avoid the world, the inner world and the outer world. And now go back to it, go into it. And basically, this is the tantric, the non-dual tantric, or, Kashmir Shaivism, where the sages are not in a mountain by themselves. They are going the marketplace, they have lovers, they have jobs, they are fully into the world, and basically, even with pleasures, some drugs. So this is the tantric, where we are no longer, since I am safe and cannot be hurt at all, then going towards the emotion fully and towards the relation fully, because the emotions are still made of consciousness, and everything is made of consciousness. So there's no point to withdraw. So although Scott, I think, never heard him say the word tantra, I feel that this KI is very tantric approach of coming back and meeting all of these, disowned, exiled parts of ourselves, and like full embodiment.
Yeah, I mean, that's not my path, so I don't know a lot about the language, but I mean, it feels right. Exactly. My whole thing was, I found it a different way, which is I came into spirituality thinking that the answer was neti to renounce all the stuff. That started that way. It's come almost 180 since then. In other words, it's not renouncing, it's waking up in the midst of. So somehow I saw that I was repressing, at first, sexuality. I was repressing emotion. I was repressing parts of myself. I had trauma unresolved. So that's how I found it, is through the trauma and the repression. I didn't find it through the text, in other words, the ancient traditions. But it's great that we have that. Like, I would like to hear more about that in the modern world.
Yeah. Also, I can see another benefit. We're still at the benefit, because it's important, by doing this work, and people who are doing it seriously, they are less afraid of their emotions. This is a very big thing. I mean, so I'm not afraid of myself. I mean, some of them are really hard, difficult emotions, and it's not like for the faint of heart, especially these trauma energies, but somehow getting more comfortable of feeling fully, consciously, spaciously. So that I could see that in a way diminish my need of teachers, actually. Because I know I can see I would feel a little bit of sorts, and it was like a quick circuit. Okay, maybe let's check up let's go to a retreat, or let's go to a guided meditation, or let's listen to Eckhart, let's listen to Rupert, let's listen to Muji, and they will talk about the transcendental, and they will be like, oh, okay. Or even when I would even look for videos about dealing with suffering. Yeah, I would, Rupert, Eckhart, they talk about how to deal with sadness, how to deal with unpleasantness. There was always this, okay, how to do it so that I don't feel bad anymore, So there was still, as they say, using spiritual techniques to avoid the emotion, using the tool of welcoming to not welcome it.
Yeah, can I say something about that? Here's another little metaphor that I've used is like allowing everything or welcoming everything. This is just a metaphor, but it's like there's a little guy on your shoulder who's basically filtering out a whole bunch of stuff for you, like so that you don't really have, so you're really not with everything. That's the whole point. So it's like that little guy's like saying, oh, here comes anger. Don't worry, I got your back. Unless this is going to be hidden completely. But then our mind says we're allowing everything. That's the bamboozle right there. Or like, this little guy says, sadness is not too scary for you. So I'm going to give you some of it, but I'm not going to give you the core grief. We're going to hold that here, protect you. And it goes with every emotion, kind of the guy has something to say about it. But yet what we're doing is lying to ourselves and saying that isn't there, as if we are actually being with everything. That, if that could change for people, it could go a lot deeper. If you could just understand that your nervous system is not at all interested in allowing everything. And so then you want to work with the nervous system. You want to work with that programming that doesn't allow it before you can say, I'm allowing everything, I think.
Yeah. I was talking to someone from the community, and they wanted us to talk more, and we're not going to do it now, but this intergenerational pain body. And basically the more she's doing this work, the more she realizes how, because of her unprocessed trauma and lack of skills, and also because she was raised by really unconscious parents who really hurt her and didn't take care of her, and really, she did to some degree this to her kids. It's so anyway, the trauma is being collective. Actually, Gabor Mate talks about it, as well as Thomas Hubel. So healing the collective trauma, it's not just on the level of humanity, but the past and the future. And so that's what I see one of the benefits of going to the third dimension work with trauma and repression is that when I go there, I find these programs of don't feel, and these are universal things I've seen on many people, that something in us, it says, the little guy says, hey, don't feel, hold this back, be strong, don't be weak, I don't want to feel this, I'm afraid to feel this, whatever. These are repression commands, repression programs. And so I can, as I investigate them, I can see that it's not mine. I mean, it's mine now, but it came from before me. If we could have some energetic map of that, probably would be amazing. And then, so there are all these patterns and trauma patterns, and sense of separation is transmitted and through osmosis. And I could see that if I don't allow myself to feel fully, I don't have a child, but if I ever have a child, he will surely get this from me just by hanging out with me, or by some little remark. So somehow I'm healing the intergenerational kind of schema here.
Yeah, it's really important. And that's another thing that people, I think it scares people about KI, because we use these big words like collective, intergenerational. It's already scary. I mean, even trauma that happens in your lifetime is scary. And now we're talking about, intergenerational and collective, but it does break down to a body-mind connection, all of it. And so the third dimension works the same on all of that. It actually ends up feeling the same. It's like there's big energy, whether it's collective or intergenerational. I guess the only thing I would add to what you said would be, I think we're leading into some practice questions eventually here. Yeah. Because I want to get down to, when we say collective and intergenerational, how much of that is, again, unprocessed emotion, because scary stuff has been passed on to us, and our parents didn't feel it, their parents didn't feel it, and then we've got everybody else in the world not feeling stuff. So this is like, it's bigger than me or you, I think, is the thing to remember. It's much bigger. I love the map thing, because if you could actually map that out, you could see that none of these thoughts or feelings even belong to you in a way. They don't even belong to you, but we're identifying with them. Like you could see it mapped out going all the way back to your great grandfather, or, Yeah, or some of the shame that I encountered literally didn't have anything to do with me. It was almost like a cacophony of voices of the collective that were trying to keep me from doing something, you know, some sexual thing or something. So yeah, I think we do have to contend with that. There's no separation, say it that way.
Yeah,
So yeah, so your trauma is the world's, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, no separation. Yeah, we look at it like between here and now, what everything is made of that, but also past and future, and also human. I like this humanity seen as a body, the body of humanity, and then the body of humanity in the past and future. um, in psychology, even Bowen, there was a very wise and intuitive therapist a long time ago, and he discovered this. And Freud, with this, when he will work with people, he would ask them to tell about 3 generations back, and all of these patterns, and talking about it. So I think it might be nice to do this more in KI, although I remember we've done it like in inquiry now, not just in talk therapy. In inquiry, bring up my mom and her mom and the family on the mother's side and the family on the father's side, and inquire as into their patterns and see which one I got here, which patterns of adaptation, which patterns of repression, which emotions were allowed, which emotions were not allowed, doing that here and there. In this, what we call we space, like we as the Algiu family, we could, these are very powerful things that I think for some people who had a lot of shit from childhood and the family, they can see, oh my God, this is such a bigger picture here.
Here's what's coming up for me around that, because so I can hear somebody saying, well, why do we have to find the root of something? And I've heard that in non-dual teachings, even in like modern Dzogchen teachings. They'll say you don't have to find the root of anything. You allow everything to be as it is, coming and going. The problem, though, is if we don't find the root of it, the same triggers and the same suffering will keep happening. And if at best, we're going to be exploring the trigger as it's happening in real time, missing the fact that it's actually coming because of dad's anger, or grandfathers being in the concentration camp, or whatever else. Like that unprocessed emotion is being carried around. So we're getting triggered, and it looks like it's the current situation. So I think part of the bypassing in spirituality is that we're not finding the root. Because if we found the root and we parked there, like I had to park with my mom's family. Most of my repression came from my mom's side of the family. So I had to actually park at the root of that and have those people up and explore the conditioning there. Before I did that, I kept repressing emotion in all these different current relationships, and I couldn't get to it because it wasn't happening by itself. It was happening because of the original trauma. So I think that if people could just hear that, if they're questioning, do I need to find the root? Do I need to do trauma work? Think about it. If you're being triggered over conditioning that is elusively held in your body, that you don't even know what it is because it's from the past, how would you get behind those triggers? Current trigger, how would you really get behind them? So it goes back to the things, do you want a non-duality that's really free, where you're actually emotionally free and looking at all that stuff? Or do you just want the kind of awakening where you say these things, but in reality, you're still getting triggered, still repressed, because it's going to the root of the issue?
Yeah.
Or still having chronic pain, if I can extend it that far. You're getting diseases, some of us, because we're not going to the root of our suffering.
When I was in non-duality more focused, there was this, my teachers would say this that seemed very important. They would say that the root of all suffering is the belief and felt sense of being a separate, autonomous, independent entity. So that is like the main branch of the chandelier, out of which there will be many other branches. And they will say, hey, just see through this, and see that this is why you are suffering, because you believe and feel as if this consciousness right now that is aware is a separate, autonomous, independent entity, separate from everything. So all the time the teacher will say, well, I have this relational thing now. Well, yeah, see that it's, go to the root. And somehow that didn't, I couldn't make that practical. I couldn't quite do something with that, although it made a lot of sense. And it was more like some kind of intellectual, spiritual level. But what I can see now is that what the teacher was saying is true. But for me, the strongest sense of me, personal me, which the ego, the strongest is, as a separate thing, is when I'm with this abandonment, when there's abandonment, trauma energy, resisting sadness, resisting fear, identify with I am alone. So somehow I feel like with the KI, we go into much more somatic in the body of this. Okay, well, let's look at this sense of separation. What is it made of? And for me, it was this, unprocessed abandonment and fear of feeling fear, and sadness and fear of feeling sadness. And as I face them skillfully, they diminish a lot. So then I have less of a sense of separation, actually. And non-duality and all those pointers, like, the sky and the mountain and the computer and my thoughts are made of that. It's like, yeah, man, I can roll with that. That makes sense. But if I'm having these things that I don't want to feel, then it's hard. It's like, what the fuck, man? I'm suffering here, Yeah.
That's a good point, because like in the triggers is when all the repression and the trauma is active. Right. So if I'm in it, a lot of the non-dual investigations happen in a non-triggered state. You're at a retreat and the teacher says, from this, let's look to see what you are. But you don't really have to deal with the reactions and the responses of trauma in that moment. So I think that's troubling for people, because I used to call it the satsang crash. People would go to retreat, my retreat or Rupert's or somebody else's. And then, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I know what I am now. But you did the investigation in a safe container. You see, you can't, that doesn't translate to real life very well. And so what they would do is, like, Wednesday would come, and like I've said to you before, man, my wife just fucking pisses me off. I don't even know what I was thinking at the retreat, because I am totally in it right now. And I was saying, well, here's the greatest time to investigate the separation right here. It's not at the retreat. It's actually right.
Scott, this is so trippy, because my teacher would say the opposite, man. They would say, when people come and say, hey, it's like, I'm like fucked at home. And it's like, what shall I do when that happens? What should I do when I feel that, when I'm so caught in a sense of separation? And one of my teachers would say, dude, when you are like that, there's nothing you can do. So let it kind of pass. And when you are in a more calmer state, then investigate the root cause of it, of the belief and felt sense of separation. So
that's perfect, because then the repression can go into the unconscious at that point. See, that's bypassing to me, because all my trauma is going to go right into dormancy for me.
I just want to say this, because as I discovered this third dimension, and I discovered how other teachers or teachings, they supported my bypass, I started to criticize them and to, I want to say that I'm really deeply grateful for all those teachings, like, Rupert and Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti and Francis and the Fourth Way. They were really, really necessary. I could see that they did the best they could with what they had. and also I misunderstood a lot of them, and I find them, they're very useful. So I encourage people come to me to study those things, to get especially the first dimension stuff. And yeah, so I recommend them. Yeah, I just want to course correct a little bit here.
Yeah, because the map is an integral map. It's basically saying there's a place for all of this. That's what integral is. So Ken Wilber didn't come out in the world and say, it's all integral. The rest of you are wrong. He said, no, at integral, there's a place for everybody, but we have to bring some intelligence to it because people are suffering and people are bypassing, major issues. So he built up this structure to show us that we're at different stages of consciousness. But everybody's included. Everybody's included in that. But if we don't talk about it, then we can stay stuck. Because like if we just all go to first dimension teachings, we might not get to the trauma and the repression. So we want to talk about that too. And what Ken does, he says, there may be a higher or a deeper or a better practice for you, a higher or a deeper or a more integral understanding or insight or realization that's available. But if you stay where you're at and you're not open to transformation, questioning where you're at, questioning the dimension that you're in, now this way we can say it here. In integral, what he says is if you're at a stage of consciousness in which there's a lot of suffering, your work is to question what you're believing at that stage. So you can go into deeper recognition. Well, we don't talk about stages, we talk about dimensions of practice. So yeah, we're celebrating first dimension. It's because of first dimension that I wrote 7 books that had a non-dual realization.
Yeah.
Can't poo-poo that.
Yeah.
But right, because you have to honor that. That's important. So that's included. That's not dismissed. But it's just simply saying, okay, but if you're in that dimension and you're stuck, you might have to question some of the things that are going on there. And so the map is just saying, include it, but transcend it. Go into other states of practice, deeper dimensions, so that you can get to the real source of suffering. And don't be particularly loyal to dimensions that have helped you bypass. Include it, but you don't have to be people-pleasing. But that's the thing about people-pleasing. It's like, I don't want to rock the boat. But many of us have become repressed because we don't rock the boat. That's the reason that we're repressed. We haven't used our discernment. We can't, because it's stuffed down with the anger. So those of us who are coming out of repression, I think that we're being a voice for some people too. For example, I think in these teachings, there is a trauma bond. For example, there's a trauma bond that got set up between me, who's anger repressing, and anybody who would help me not face the anger, including teachers. There was a trauma bond there that people don't like the word, but if you understand what I mean, it's like, I was drawn to that, like a moth to a flame, right? I wasn't going to the teacher who was yelling at people. I was going to the teacher who was perfectly still and peaceful, because I bonded with that because I was frightened of my own anger. So if to the extent that my bonding with that teacher kept my repression down, as I wake up from the trauma bond, I might have something else to say about it. See, waking up from the trauma bond. And that's where I think we wake up from these trauma bonds. And you said something that's delicious. You said, when we do the third dimension work, we're actually going to be letting go of all these people outside of ourselves that we've given our power to, including Scott Kilby or anybody else. Because you act like, once you learn third dimension work, as you know, you're more skillful than you can do more on your own than I can ever do for you. I mean, really. So it makes the teachers obsolete in the end, and hopefully the third dimension breaks the trauma bonds of those teachings, where we're using the teachers as the surrogate parent. There's that too. So yes, they're wonderful. Are you kidding me? I love these teachers. I mean, I love them. In some ways, they saved my life. And there's a limitation.
Yeah, that's my plan, to just wrap this up in a few minutes, and then actually go into how to enter the dimension and actually practically. But my last thing was that in this Advaita Vedanta or Tantric non-dual thing, they say that, okay, first there is awakening to our true nature, and then very, very seldom it happens that this collapses the whole house of the ego. Very seldom, almost never. So then There's awakening to our true nature, and then there's the post-awakening sadhana, which means to clear out the conditioning we inherited from decades of living as unconscious and in separation, or maybe for many a lifetime, or inherited from our ancestors, these habits of thinking, acting, feeling, perceiving from separation, that although we awoke to our true nature, those persist. So I feel that the KI is a teaching that it's perfectly suited for that. Basically, it's like a post-awakening sadhana, KI. Now, this being said, it's also, I think it's a great pre-awakening sadhana too, like to avoid bypassing and to start cleaning up as we are waking up, you know?
Can I say something about that? Because I feel like
Yes.
that's how KI will be used hopefully in the future. Because I think a lot of us, we've been in spirituality for 10, 20, 30 years. Like I meet people who've been in it for 40 years. So we're at the tail end of it, seeing that we didn't catch all these things and we're cleaning it up. But now that we're coming out, you and me and others with KI, we're talking to people who are new on the path. And with a map, if you can see, like we're actually showing you from the very beginning, you can catch some of this stuff. And I actually do think that in terms of embodying presence, there's not really an end point, and we don't want to be focused on that. But I can't see how you wouldn't be prolonging that by not seeing the root of something. So if you want, like people are always talking about, I don't want this to go forever. How long will I seek? And the thing is, you got to remember, your nervous system wants to seek as long as it can, you know, because your nervous system's trying to stay safe, right? So your nervous system's trying to stay safe by seeking, and it doesn't want to go to the scary places. So what we're trying to do early in the path is saying, if you'll go there safely, you might have a shorter path. You might have to not go through all the weird, funky shit that we all went through. Those of us, chronic pain, cancer, some of us have died. You know, like this stuff is happening for us. So if you're early in the path and you can see us, what's going on with us, we're trying to tell you before you enter the gate that there's some things that we've learned about it. And if you want to take a look at it, you can not do what we did.
Yeah.
So that's a map thing, but we're going to talk about some practice now. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe let's start a new episode